is.
Yes, good everything. Hello to you. Hey,
Good
everybody.
everything. Mm.
Good morning, Dr. Carr.
Good morning. Good morning, Professor Hunter. I'm still that should have troubleshot this. The YouTube and the narrative I've connected now. There we go. Yeah.
Oh,
I see everybody on both places. My goodness. How you feeling this morning? You said
it's funny. I've been getting up at like 5:30 to walk, but this morning when I had to get up, I was like,
there's a difference, isn't it?
yeah, the brain is weird. It's a strange thing. You have to constantly exercise it as well as everything else. You have to work with yourself.
Gotta work with yourself, and we managed to do it some kind of
Yeah,
way. So
you man, listen, that's the commitment. It's funny. It's like I got up, I was like, let me get a shower so I can just at least be present. And I was thinking about the work, but it's not work that we do every day, and how some folk are, like the wind has shifted, and I think we require more because we love ourselves more. And so we no longer allowing people to play in our faces and feed us trash and get away with nonsense, and we're requiring more of people, and then we're finding out who doesn't have more to give or who never had anything to give to begin with. And it's just a bar is raised, and I think I want to keep seeing it do that, because we deserve to have a world where people are treating each other like human beings, but also considering, and if they're presenting, then they should have something to offer, and if they don't, we should let them know. So I'm
that's
great. I get to
there.
be here in class with my pen, and
No, me
yeah.
too. I got my. I'm fortified. I got all my writing instruments and all my note cards. I probably probably got more note cards than anything else. Blank ones, because it's listening time.
So
It's listening time.
let me ask you. So your this is your what number trip to?
I was trying to figure that out. I was trying to figure that out overnight, and the first time we went to the Nile Valley, myself, Dr. Beatty, Dr. Watkins, we were still in graduate school at the time. That was 1996. We
Wow.
went with the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. We were in Ghana for about 5 days, and we spent the rest of the 2 weeks in Kemet. And half of us started in Kemet and came to Ghana for our conference, and then the other half came to Ghana first, and then went to Kemet. And I was fortunate enough to come to Ghana first, and then we went to Kemet, and I was with Nzinga and Baba Jake Carruthers and Ace and everybody. So we went on to Kemet and stayed. I was glad to go to West Africa first because, obviously that side of the continent is where we came here from to this criminal enterprise. And I'd always said that I wouldn't step into the ocean until I stepped into it from the right side.
Oh,
So yeah, I didn't. My feet never touched the water of the Atlantic Ocean from the side that we got captured from. So I wasn't born on the water. There's no 1619 project in me or any of us. But having made that oath that I would make sure I spend the rest of my life making sure we scrub that from our mind. What would it look like for me to submit to it? So at any rate, and then we went to Kemp. So that was 96. Didn't come
next year.
back.
So next year is going to be your 30th
Well,
anniversary.
no, yeah. How about that? And then we're gonna, yeah, we had the world will be quite different a year from now than it is right now. So that's exciting to think about. Sorry, I thought I heard some ringing somewhere. Anyway, but yeah, yeah.
Mm,
The there is some ringing somewhere. Hold on for a minute. Is that me? Oh yeah, it is. Hold on for a
okay.
minute. Give me a second. That's this watch over here. I
Okay.
know I
Here's
heard it. There it
also
is. I got
where
it.
we
Very good. There we
um
go. I had to, all the electronic devices is charging up. When we get on the plane, I don't trust any thing that's not under my control.
no
So
trip.
let me control what I can control. And then, oh, we don't have no problem. I already anticipated that nothing would work. So therefore, I've got I always anticipate when I go somewhere that if it's beyond my control, it's gonna be messed up. So I'm never disappointed. And when things fail, I already got a backup plan. It's like Batman. Oh, I got a contingency plan for all of y'all, including Superman. I got a little piece of kryptonite in my bag. So, but at any rate, yeah. But we didn't go. I didn't go every year since '96. After that, although we'll be. It's right. 30th anniversary. Didn't come back for about 10 years, 11 years. Came back in 2007. We went to Kemet for the um, 20th anniversary of the big journey that ASCAT took with 1,000 Black folk. That was a journey that, interestingly, two young brothers, Hakeem and Hassan Jeffries, came on with their uncle and auntie, Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries, and 1,000 Africans. That was the journey where Baba Issa got
Right.
sick and he made transition. And so at that point, I made the promise to the family, to the ASCAP community, that if it were in my power, I would come back and continue that work with the generation behind me. So in 2008, we brought about 80 Howard students along with Baba Ace's family and Mama Passy Joe and Ken Nunn, his wife, their daughter, who's now an ancestor, Nefertiti. And we um, brought a bunch of Howard students. And I came back just about every year after that until COVID. And then COVID hit. And then, of course, the entire thing shifted to the way that we always want to do it, which is everybody come. I hadn't intended on that study tour to be a university-based study tour. Never did. It's grateful to have the next generation, to have those young people, but that's not ever what it was about. And thanks to you, and thanks to this world that has opened now, which is a return to the essential objective of the community, we now, having jailbroken that, or not, we're back to the way it was. So this 130 or so who are going this year, this is the third year since COVID that we are journeying, leaving out of DC. Well, we're leaving out of New York. Um, and I'm so happy because among the people traveling, one of my replacements, Shanice Thompson, who was in high school. Well, she wasn't in high school actually. She was even elementary school age. No, when the first time I went, but when I got to Howard, she was from Philadelphia. She was one of my Freedom School students, and she was 16 years old. And so then she came to Howard, got her degree, and went to Boston University, then Ohio State for a PhD. She just published her first book, which I have here. It came out, and so I'm gonna get her to sign it in the Nile Valley. This is
Okay.
Oshun Lemonade and Intertextuality, Oshun Lemonade and Intertextuality, Afro-Atlantic Religion and Black Cultural Production, University of Florida Press. This whole book is about Beyonce and connecting it to Yoruba and ancient Egyptian and all that. Brilliant scholar, Shanice Thompson. She's on our faculty now at university, and she's going to Kemet for the first time, even though she's been thinking about it since Freedom School 20 years ago. So I didn't get a chance. I'll see her in a few minutes when we go to jail. Okay,
As you prep for this, what's going to be different about this trip for you?
that's a good question. Everything is everything is the same and everything is different. I'm thinking about that a lot. For me, this study tour, this ancient Egyptian study tour, centers our attempt to continue to recover that momentum of memory, but the circumstances always require us to integrate what's happening now into why we do what we do. It doesn't change why we do what we do, but in fact, it just deepens why we do what we do. But it changed. So I think this year, for me, it's about hmm, it's about continuing to strengthen that lens that lets us make sense of what we're experiencing right now. So that means that we're in the world is getting much more clear for people who don't pay attention, like you said a minute ago. That makes it easier for us. So as the world continues to shrink, you can see the connections more easier. for example, we know in the social structure we live in over these last 5 centuries that capitalism, white nationalism, these have been the driving elements that shrunk the globe, that connected people, regardless of who we are, where we come from. We're all very different, but we're all the same species. But that element of human experience has been the shaping element of the last 500 years. There hasn't been a moment where that is more easy to see than now. Even last year, this time, it wasn't as easy to see because it can be obscured by what appears to be a real shift and a potential victory. Remember, this time last year, we were caught up in a moment of kind of anxiety, but euphoria. It's like, oh wow, in the United States, oh Joe Biden, he's not gonna beat Trump. Trump is back. Is the under wait, Kamala Harris, what? Yeah, we're gonna everybody. No, y'all can't see it. This project that they're on, they've been plotting this for 500 years, and in the United States, they've been plotting it for 70 years, and now it's heat. Okay, that's why people say, "Why are you so enthusiastic?" I said, "Y'all, you've been misled. Now, can you see now? Okay, you can see. Okay, now let's study the thing." So when we go to Egypt, my primary objective is now that we have, now that we're here, we're going to look at the old kingdom, new kingdom, middle kingdom. We're going to look at these pharaohs, going to look at these social movements, going to read some meta. And the question is, why are we doing this? We trying to understand how can we live together and what can we learn from all our attempts to live together that we can use today. The United States of America is, for the first time in human history, a convening of at least a handful of everybody who will ever walk this planet. That's never happened before in world history. We're here in New York City, and over again yesterday, we were talking, I was saying, look, this is why they hate New York. Because you're going to see one of everybody who lives on this planet walking these streets. And if you're somebody who wants to dominate, you would lose your mind walking in Midtown Manhattan. You know what I'm saying? I said, what do you not see here? In control. The people who want to control everybody. Stephen Miller's whole head would explode here. Not because for two reasons. One, you want to force these people to do what you want. But that's not the real reason your head would explode. The real reason your head would explode is when you walk into a Macy's, or you stand there in front of the Nuts for Us stand and watch people get peanuts, or you're going down the middle and see these dingy looking Spider-Man and Deadpools, or you over here going into the subway. The real reason your head explodes is because you like it. You love it. But you can't, that thing between the thing you really feel, which is this is wonderful, look at that, and the I want to control, that thing is driving you crazy. If you would just surrender to the thing you love. That's why all these Republican officials keep getting busted for pornography, right? The thing you can't, if you would just relax into it, you turn that stuff off because there's something missing. That hatred is fueling you want to dominate, you want to desire. That's not, no, it's ultimately, I think all human beings are essentially good. Maybe some people got some genetic miswiring and some problems, but the thing this system has created is blocking you from just relaxing and being in the world. Kemet, Egypt, ancient Egypt, was in what we would call a multicultural society. But the problem with Egypt is it was an African society, meaning that these Africans had figured out a way to live together, not without problems. We're going to talk about those too, not without problems. But it is so natural to us and at the same time foreign to us that if you go there and just stand here and then let's go talk about what we saw and what they were trying to do, what you'll realize is there are better ways of doing what we're doing right now. And we can learn some of the ways and recover some of that from standing here at this thing that's 5,500 years old. What were we doing there? This is a little village, which is important. We're all human. This isn't the savannah. This isn't the woods. Do you see this monumental structure that makes everything that has come after it pale, and that everything that came after it is based on? You did that. Do you remember now? So anyway, that's.
Do you think, because when I hear you talk to Stephen Miller, I don't think of someone that necessarily wants to dominate. I think of someone who looks in the mirror and feels less than. And
Mhm.
when when you walk into a space where you see people enjoying, like I remember being in college and, I was DJing in the pub and, the black people from the kitchen would come in because, Drew was predominantly white and I'm playing my music. I was so didn't care. I'm not catering to the folk at all. I'm playing what I want to hear, which was weird. But nobody would come and dance except for the people from the kitchen, and a few people, and they would be dancing their souls out. And the white kids would be watching. They couldn't do it, but they admired it.
Yes.
They wanted to participate, but
Yes.
you would not, you would look crazy next to, Hassan from the kitchen who, had his
Was
rag
getting down.
to every beat, and you don't feel the beat, you don't hear the beat, and you want the beat, but it's not. So you're angry and sad, and the best response to that, excuse me, when you're not fully formed, is to crush it, is to eliminate it, so I don't have to deal with it. It's like the day they crushed all of those black people's music in the middle of the baseball field because disco was a problem. But disco was
Yes.
a problem. Your inability to have a soul is the problem. And I think the more we have that conversation and challenge people, and it's okay. I couldn't dance like that either, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. And more importantly,
Mm,
I enjoyed seeing people enjoy themselves. And there are other ways
mm.
to participate. For me, it was spinning the records, to see if I could take that to the next level. I think people don't challenge themselves to see how they can participate, even if that's not their thing. Can you find your thing in the midst of what's going on instead of trying to
Yes.
stop it so that nobody
Yes.
gets to have fun? Is that what we're doing?
Yes. Hmm. You're a DJ. Don't let. And I think we all heard that. And I say word or continue.
No,
You had to put sounds and rhythms together. I mean, that's a different.
that's
It's
true.
a sensibility. You know what I'm saying? In terms of ways of knowing, how can I reconcile this thing that appears at first to be different than this other thing to this other thing so that the difference remains, but the underlying similarity is there? That's the G. People say, well, DJing is not an art. It is absolutely an art. It's a way of knowing. You got to be able to hear a thing and then reveal it, and everybody else can now hear it and be like, oh, yeah. And it just keeps building community. It's a beautiful exercise. There's no DJ that can't, no DJ can approach putting sounds together without a forethought of community. I
Correct.
gotta
Correct.
reconcile. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yes.
so what you do is, I mean, it's maybe, and it's interesting because, and I'll talk about this in a minute. Tony K. Bombara, my friend, the good brother Louis Messiah, just finished. Well, he it debuted at the Black Star Film Festival in Philly this week. TCB, the Tony K. Bombara School of Organizing, the film on Tony K. Bombara. So Philly's own Louis Messiah, his good friends with Tony K. Bombara, just came out. And one of the things that you see in the film is Toni Morrison, her good friend, is talking about her. And then Nikki Finney, the writer, and also her friend, talks about her and says she was a cultural organizer. And one thing Miss Morrison says in the film, she says, I used to be a little annoyed with her because I wanted her to write. She was such a beautiful writer. So when she went into filmmaking, I was like, yeah, but you're such a, and then I realized that for her, it's all the same thing. And so, and then they show a clip of Tony K. Bombara, and this is the most footage that anybody, certainly that I know, has ever seen the Tony K. Bombara in one place. Louis Messiah, somebody, he got most of what you could find from Tony K. on film. And in an interview, she says, I'm an organizer. All of this is all part of the same work. And if there ever came a moment between when I had to choose between like my writing and my organizing, I would have to take a very serious look at my writing because I can't, because I'm here. My work in the world is to contribute to my community. So you say I was a DJ. Yeah, that was the work you were doing right then. But those people came out the kitchen because through that you were building community. And as you said, these other people are looking, well, you should stay. You gotta get on. I'm trying to help y'all. It's very much like Tony K. Bombara. You're a cultural worker. You know what I'm saying?
As you're saying that, we are conditioned. You go to school, you learn a craft, what's your career? And I would reject the notion that I was a writer, even though, you know, and it's funny because I would push back because I see writers like, you read and like, that's a writer. But I've come to that conclusion, even as I do all the other things, that the common thread is that thing that you just articulated, and I had to come to realization, because what it does then, what it frees you from, I'm a writer. People want you to be a thing so that they can thingify you, so they can put you in a box, right? So as long as you're a thing, I am a lawyer. No, no.
No,
Those are tools to do the thing that you were put here to do. So I can
that's
write,
right.
I can do all of these things. But you're absolutely right. Since a child, it's always been about that. And once
Mm,
you realize why you were put here, it makes everything else easy. Now you just use all of the tools you've gathered to then do more. And so, yeah, thank you
yes.
for articulating that, because that is
No,
absolutely that
thank you.
brought me joy. I was like, bump these kids, these white kids on this campus, bump them. Oh, y'all gonna let me do this? Okay. I'm always surprised too that people let me do things. It's like, oh, y'all go, okay, thank you.
Thank
What
you.
happens? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. But now, thank you for giving me this space to do it. And then as you create the space, everybody gets to be who they are. It's funny. Nikki Finney said this too. She said the thing I learned about Tony K. Bombara is whatever that thing is that you are and that you do it everywhere. That's what she said. And you do it everywhere. It don't matter. Yeah, yes. Oh, that's beautiful to hear you say that and to see it in the world. Um, Sister Alexis Pauline Gums, the writer, said this in the film. She's talking about Tony K. Bombara's daughter, who's also in the film. And she said, what I learned from her, she didn't know Tony K directly, but what she said, but what I learned is that this idea that you intervene in the world, you show up in the world as you are fully. And it actually came on the heels of somebody else talking a story about she had a baby. She was in Atlanta, it's just her and her child. She said, and this old beat up orange car showed up in my driveway one day. And who gets out? Tony Cave Bar. She said, who is it? She said, girl, I heard you was up here with your babies by yourself. Come on, let's go. He said, what? You don't, she said, heard people talk about that. I hear people. Yeah. And then, no, actually, it wasn't. Alexis Gums wasn't talking about her daughter. She was talking about Aisha Simmons, who is a filmmaker, one of the people who helped work with the Black Star Film Festival in Philadelphia, whose mother, Zahara Simmons, we had the Philadelphia Freedom School students read their book last year. She and her one-time partner, Michael Simmons, that's their parents, that's their family. They came out of SNCC. But at any rate, what Alexis says is Gomes is that I didn't know Tony K, but I know Aisha Simmons, and the way Aisha Simmons shows up for me is the way that Tony K. Bombara showed up in the world, and what she learned from Tony K. Bombara, who, when Aisha Simmons was a little girl, she said Tony K. would invite me, and I felt like she was like another mother to me, and she would talk with me, not as an elder, although she was, but as somebody who I could challenge and ask questions and go back and forth. And what Tony K. Bombara taught me was sister is a verb. To sister somebody, you know what I'm saying? To brother somebody, it's not a label, it's a verb. I'm gonna show you what I mean. So when you show up in the world, Karen, you're not just talking about you like this is what I'm gonna, and it's okay. What is she? Well, to me, she's somebody that says, we gotta spread this, we gotta bring this together. So I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna help with that. And so people like that don't have to describe and define themselves. The
No.
people in the world will show. In fact, it was Nikki Finney. Remember, we talked about this before Tony came on bar when the brothers showed up at her house or on the street. They were actually on the street because now in the film I get to see the story from the person who was there with
The
her.
film, Dr. Carr.
Well, it's called the TCB, Tony Cave and Bar, the TCB School of Organizing. Shout out to my sister, Dr. Kelly Sparrow Mickens, who for many years ran Philadelphia Freedom Schools for us in Philly, who's still in Philly. She texted me uh, late night before last. He had just come from the screening in Philly. And Kelly said, as many times as you talked about Tony Cade over the years with us, when I saw that, it just made me think about you. Yeah, that's how we had the show. So she took, and that's what reminded me, oh, damn, the film. So I went on the website, it's Black Star Film Festival in
Come on.
Philadelphia. I mean, when they started the film, it's all Black women. And they had a remote screening. So on the train up from Philly, from DC to New York, I just registered and got the screen. You see, I don't know if you hopefully you still get it. You can stream it and see the film, and you can see that. And I thought, there are a handful of people. That's not true. There are many people in my life who move through the world that way. And you're one of them. In other words, I don't have to tell you what I am. So like say, Nikki Finney tells a story in the film. The poet, the writer Nikki Finney, who's very good friends with Tony Kaye. She said, when in Atlanta, walking down the street, and this man comes up and says, "Are you that writer woman?" Talking to Tony Kaye, because she wouldn't describe it. And she said, "Yeah, I'm that writer woman." And the brother's like, "Well, me and my wife trying to get a house. And I don't write that well. My sister, my wife doesn't write that well. Can you help me?" And Nikki Finney is like, she's thinking to herself, she's not that kind of writer. Tony Kaye said, "Come by my house Saturday, 4 o'clock. I will help you." And she said the man came, that she helped them, and they got the house. She said that's what it meant. So are you that? Because they knew her, not because she was publishing in these places and going, no, because she was doing community workshops, she's organizing, she's showing up at the meetings, she got the after school stuff. Are you that writer woman? Yeah, I'm that writer woman. Me and my wife trying to get this house. Can you help us? Right? But yeah, I help you. Come by my house. That's so who works Karen Hunter? Is she what she helped? This is the help. This is the thing. There's no definition. You don't have to try. You do what you do everywhere. And so going to Kemet for me is, and for us, not just for me, for us, is an exercise in doing what we do everywhere. We studied ancient Egypt for many years. At this point, at age 60, I would say at least 35 years, although as a little boy, I was always fascinated with it. In the 6th grade, the first time I got to study or even think about ancient Egypt, for a lot of us, I think this is true for many of us, in grade school, you see the images. The first image you see, of course, is Tutankhamun, King Tut. One of the first ones, pyramids, King Tut. And we'll be at the museum uh, looking at Tutankhamun again. And a lot of people, for the first time, there's nothing like coming into a space like Egypt, Kemet, with people for whom this is their first time coming. You can talk a lot, you can almost over explain, or you can just be quiet. And I think the most powerful way to come into a space that you have never experienced before is to come in silence anywhere. And that certainly that's true for Kemet. But that annual ritual of return, not fraught with out tensions, because there are a lot of people. I mean, Kemet is the anchoring human governance formation and social structure. Governance meaning intimate structures, and then social structure meaning connecting all these various groups together. It is the anchoring expression in for much of the world. It isn't the only one. We're a diverse planet, but it is one of the, I say one of the anchoring moments. And so it's very important to understand that when you experience it, you're coming into, and for those, I would ask people, if you're new to the space, or even if you're not, to go back into our archive, go back into our conversations, and you'll see how we've tried to approach this conversation on several times. And next week, when we're in the Nile Valley, we will have been there a week, and then I'll be able to share some more um, of the experiences we've had. But the the real issue, I think, for us now is to explore what it means to live together. And so what I thought we'd do this morning, just for a few minutes, and then we'll head to the airport, is put this in context. And we could start with, or continue with, we've already started. We can continue by adding a contemporary moment. As I said, we're here in New York, which is that John Clark would always say is kind of like this multinational city. This city with people from all the nations of the world in one way or the other here. Early this morning, I went out to get, a cup of coffee, and the all night place around the corner here. It's a little South Korean dude sitting in there 4 day in the morning. And he starts talking about South Korea. Because, Yeah, typically, where you from? Kind of had this conversation. But as I just came in, I suppose the way I entered the space, so I greeted him. He's an elder, and I got what I was gonna get. I came to the counter. Um, I handed him the currency with both hands and kind of bowed. He took it and bowed, and then and they said, "He asked, where you from?" Because typically, when you treat people with a different kind of humanity, like Harry Belafonte said, Paul Robeson told him, when you learn people's songs, they want to know who you are. How you know my song? Even a small thing like treating people with a common humanity can lead to a different kind of path in terms of engagement, however temporary. And he started talking, we started talking, and he said, yeah, I'm South Korean. And he started talking about, South Korea and North Korea shouldn't be two countries, how they divided my country up. And he started talking about the history with China and the history with Japan. He's very proud of the educational system. And we started talking about contemporary politics because they just had the whole thing. South Korea, like Brazil, like other countries which actually have operating governments that are aspiring to a different standard, they got rid of their president when he was acting up. So we started talking about that and comparing it to here. Very interesting conversation we had. And so, this is New York. You could do that more easily here. And so, talking with an Egyptian storekeeper yesterday, going around getting a few last minute things. And so he was showing us pictures of him and his daughter, they're Egyptian. When they were over there, he was asking us, have you been to the new museum? I said, yeah, we went last year. He said, well, this year it's open fully. Last year it wasn't only partially open. He started showing us pictures. And we were there. Oh, yeah, we haven't seen that gallery. Yeah, when you go, make sure, Egyptian guy. What is an Egyptian? Arab? Yes. A Nubian? Yes. A lot of different people in Egypt, right? And it made me think about David Graham Du Bois, the son of Shirley Graham Du Bois, the son of W.B. Du Bois, his novel, And Bid Him Sing, where he writes this fictional novel of this African journalist from the United States who moves to Egypt after the assassination and the politics is going on in the world. And while he's there, he meets Malcolm X and he meets these brothers and sisters over there. You see the contradictions and the tensions of David Graham Du Bois's book and Bid Him Sing. And you think about the multiculturalism, the multinationalism all over the world in these places, particularly these large cities like Cairo or Lagos or New York or London or you name it, Rio or, Salvador Bahia, you name it, and Kingston, Jamaica, these different places, these urban zones where people kind of come together. And so I thought about that because, of course, this week we saw the funeral of Officer or Detective Didarul Islam, who was only 36 years old, a brother who, of course, lost his life in the killings that took place here in New York City this week. The guy who came in and shot up, the NFL officer was like, check, look at my brain after I'm gone, this kind of thing. But they had it at a masjid in the Bronx. And, we talked about this a little bit on the air on Sirius this week. I was talking with Lamont about this. It was very striking. And I confess before I say what I'm about to say about that at the onset that I might be narrated or described as a little naive when I'm reading writing because good writers, good editors, and they got AI, who knows who wrote what. But the words that were put together under the name of Maya Coleman in one of the articles that was in the New York Times this week really resonated with me because it spoke to the complexity, to the tapestry of community when we are together. And even in a moment like this, a sad moment like a funeral, the way that this article was written really kind of revealed some of the beauty of human community being in each other. She's describing the funeral. And it was her words, or the words attributed to her, along with the photographs that were taken by Vincent Alban, where you see these sisters. And I guess part of it is it kind of came together for me because I'm about to see people dressed the way that many of the folks in the photograph are dressed. These are Muslims. Of course, Egypt, primarily Muslim country, not exclusively Muslim, but particularly when we go up into inner Egypt, upper Egypt, which would be the south, Nubia, more appropriately. And you see sisters clad in black from head to toe. Some of them you can only see their eyes, and if they got on sunglasses or glasses, you can't even see that. Well, you see those images, these women in all black in the Bronx coming out of this masjid behind the casket holding the the remains, the physical remains of Officer Islam, and you see these sisters, but you see them being accompanied by New York police officers. In one photograph Vincent Albin took, you see this man of African descent with a tie on, kind of looking mournful, holding the elbow and the arm of one of these sisters who's clearly in grief. And then next to him, you see a man carrying a little boy and another little boy with his kufi on, his long garment. He's dressed in white. And then there's a woman with her arms around him. She's in complete black, except she's in complete black, including her face. It's not even a slit for her eyes. All you see is black from head to her feet. And then next to her is another police officer who looks like she could be Latina or maybe Asian or maybe of African descent from the Anglo community. You just can't tell, but you know she's not white. And she's holding this lady's arm, guiding her. Now, these are images that this the police, okay, as a formation, as a structure, as an entity. No, mess with the police. At the same time, in these uniforms are human beings with other human beings in a moment of grief and mournful and mourning. And so, I think it was struck me because I'm gonna see sisters dressed like that and brothers dressed like that in a matter of the next day, and then for the next 2 weeks after that. But in reading her description, it was quite striking because, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it. I read on the radio yesterday, on Friday, and it was interesting seeing the governor of the state of New York, Kathy Hochul, um, with a hijab on. The police commissioner got her head covered, and then Eric Adams was there, but we won't spend time on him. But it was interesting to see because you're coming into a mosque, so you're going to show respect. And you think, and then of course, Zoran Mamdani, who has been in Uganda for the last week and a half with his family, and they trying to make political hay of that. What are you doing over there? But he comes back to the city, comes back to New York, goes straight to for the airport to the family, sits with them, and so they're all there at the funeral as well. And this is what was written in the New York Times. As I said, Maya Coleman writes: 6 police officers emerged from the mosque, carrying the flag cloak casket on their shoulders. They paused momentarily in the front of a screen showing photos of Detective Islam and his children. Pause right there. Detective Islam and his children. Those 5 words, written in English in the New York Times for everybody to read. I'm sure somebody's head is exploding at the concept of Detective Islam and his children. He came here 20 years old, Bangladeshi, entered the police force, eventually comes up through the ranks as a detective. Right? Now, if that's fine if it's an episode of Law and Order, but this kind of thing, these people, we got to get these people out of our country. These people are here for the same reason you here. As he writes, they pause momentarily in the front of a screen, showing photos of Detective Islam and his children before sliding the coffin into an awaiting white hearse. Hundreds of officers stood motionless. Not one had an umbrella. You know why she's writing? Because it was raining. It's been, weather's been terrible up here. Right? It's not terrible today. Thank God. Thank Allah. Thank Oladumare. Thank Amun, who, although hidden, is the source of all life, power, and health. It's not raining today, but it was raining the day of the funeral. Now you got thousands of cops come from all over the city of New York. All beyond, you got these police funerals, they all show up. And again, footnote, anybody thinking I'm kidding for the police, you're not paying attention. Absolutely not. What I'm talking about in this moment is the contrast. And in this moment, whatever other conflict is going on, there's a cessation of conflict. And don't think I'm naive enough to think that this doesn't also reinforce certain propaganda as it relates to who the police are. Absolutely not. But that's not the primary reason I'm bringing this up. I continue. There's a parade of police motorcycles revved, kicking off the procession that would soon carry the casket to its final resting place at a cemetery in New Jersey. A detective who had brought her 3-year-old daughter guided the child's hand to her head in salute. Quote, "We have to say goodbye to Officer Islam," end quote, she said to the girl. Let me pause right there. This is a Muslim. First of all, he's in a casket. I don't know what's going to happen in the cemetery because a lot of times you would bury Muslims. One of the rituals, sometimes they practice, you just put the body straight into the ground. Who knows? But right now, his remains are in a casket with one of the police flags draped over it, and they go in a white casket. And all these different kind of people, after coming out of a mosque where everybody got to get down the way the Muslims get down, if you're gonna come to this place and pay respects, with the guy who's the leading candidate to be the mayor of New York is a Muslim, a practicing Muslim who's in there, and here's the governor of New York in a hijab, and all over the place, whether it be Fox News, Trump, whoever, some of these cowardly Democratic politicians, and certainly the racists are saying, what's the loom that's getting people fired in the White House right now? Laura Loomer saying, I can't imagine a Muslim being the mayor of New York. Okay, you should calm down, take a breath, because if you keep talking like that all hard, that plastic surgery might bust, and you don't want that to happen. But at any rate, the idea that in this moment there's a truce when we live together. These are nations of people within other nations of people within a state. New York City, New York State, United States of America, whatever the hell that means. It's a state formation with many nations in it. As John Clark would say, New York is a multinational state. There are many different nations in this state. And in this moment, when you can't escape the fact that in this brutal society, one human being was so driven that they took the lives of other human beings, including a human being who was in a uniform who was trying to stop that other human being from killing everybody. And as a result, gave his own life. So now you can't escape the fact that your protocol demands you pay respect to this person who sacrificed his life for the rest of y'all in that moment. And in this moment, you're going to honor the ritual through which he joins the ancestors the way he wants it honored, the way his family wants it honored, the way his community wants it honored. These nations within nations, a parade of motorcycles revved, kicking off the procession that would soon carry the casket to its final resting place in the cemetery in New Jersey. A detective who had brought her 3-year-old daughter guided the child's hand to her head in a salute. We had to say goodbye to Officer Islam, she said to the girl. Then Miss Coleman writes, the rain now came in torrents. The white hearse took off toward the Cross Bronx Expressway, crossing beneath the elevated 6 train station. Manhattan-bound train passed overhead. I'm sorry, she says a Manhattan-bound train passed, overheard, and as the vehicles crossed paths, let out a long, mournful horn salute. You ever been on a train in New York City? That's an adventure in itself in the world. Everybody in the world is on the car, on the train, on the subway, on the Long Island Railroad, on the 6, on the ABC or the E, going uptown on the express, or taking the local, the daily downtown, whichever way you're going. As Rakim said, I go to Queens for Queens to get my crew from Brooklyn, get money in Manhattan and never been took in, go uptown in the Bronx and boogie down and get strong on the aisle, recoup and lay around 5 boroughs and on the outlying area. You've been on a train, it's an adventure every time you go. There's somebody crazy do something, and all of a sudden the whole community on the train, all these different people become one community, saying everybody head on a swivel because we don't know what the hell's about to go down. Well, that train crossed paths with the funeral procession as she wrote, she says, a Manhattan-bound train passed, overheard, and as the vehicles crossed paths, let out a long, mournful horn salute. Detective Islam's hearse headed on toward the cemetery. So I had to go look up a little something about the writer of those lines. I said, she writes so beautifully, Maya Coleman. Maya Coleman, I'm thinking, that's a white girl. I don't know, her picture, I can't tell. I think maybe not. She grew up in New York City. She went to school at Bowdoin College, where she majored in English, not a lost art. It's important to understand this. I tell students this all the time, which is much more difficult these days because Howard University has soared past the $60,000 a year mark, and now it's in the mid 60s in terms of thousands of dollars. And the federal government has made it more difficult for people to secure even loans to go to school. But I tell them this all the time. What you wanted to do as a child, what you wanted to be as a child, is it different than what you want to be now? And are there reasons other than the interests you have in life? And if the answer to that is yes, if people tell you you're supposed to go to school so you can get skills and a trade and make money, and that's an important thing, Why are they telling you that? I know it's expensive to go here for many folks in this room. If you're not on scholarship or don't have grants, it's very important. Can't waste time, but it's your life. I was a theater major, and then I went to law school. And then I decided I didn't want to do that. I want to teach. So I went back to graduate school. And that's why I'm standing here with you. And the thing you love is the thing you will pursue with all your heart. And I teach in Africana studies. There are many people in the world who would say that that's not something you should major in or minor in. You should even take a class in it. To those people, I would say, who hurt you? And why do you think that the human possibilities should be sunken down to the vision of a world that wants you to do what it needs you to do, not what you want to do? It's a difficult challenge, but I wouldn't say that to the people because, after all, we've jailbroken the university. The university isn't even a concept you should have in your mind on Saturdays or Sundays or Mondays or whenever you're in this conversation. It shouldn't be what you have in your mind when you enter the narrative space, or you're in office hours or in any of our classes. It shouldn't be what enters your mind as you think about how you want to be in the world, because this isn't that space. This is the space where you be, where we have community. And so, anyway, I'm saying out to say this. So I looked up this writer, and I was like, well, I'm very pleased, because this is clearly somebody who has worked with language, worked with words in a way that frees her up to be able to communicate the thing that she's seen in a way that resonates with the rest of us. And when you pair it with the images, it just becomes that much more powerful. And again, just thinking about that in the spirit of Toni Cade Bambara, who worked with moving images as a filmmaker, which frustrated her very good friend Toni Morrison, who just wanted her to write. But then Toni Morrison said, but Toni Cade Bambara said art, is just one aspect of her political work. And she said, Toni Morrison said of Toni Cade, she said, art is just one aspect of her political work. And then she said, of course, in that inimitable Toni Morrison way, and of course she's right. Of course she's right. You're not just writing to express, you're writing because it's part of your larger political work. And as Nikki Finney said, you do it everywhere. So when you combine the images with the words, when you combine the images with the words, and you combine that with the intent, and you practice and hone that craft and hone those skills, what you'll ultimately come to is the fact that as you make meaning in the world, cultural meaning making, when you infuse that with movement and memory, what you then have is the combination that will help others, invite others into their own capacity to do that. And that's how you change the world. You change the world that way. As Toni Cade Bambara said, the goal and the object of the writer, and I would say even broadly, more broadly, the artist, and then more broadly, the organizer, the political worker, the goal, as she called herself, a cultural worker, the goal of the cultural worker is to make revolution irresistible. You read those kind of words and you think about those kind of images and you see them, and it makes it irresistible to say, to answer that question, why can't we all live together? With, of course, we can all live together. There's a way for us to live together, even with that moment. So, going to Egypt for me is part of that intellectual work, part of that organizing work that we inherited, that I inherited, and Mario Beatty inherited, and Lethea Watkins inherited, that we all inherited, that um, those who are on our team this year inherited. Shanice Thompson and Maggie Ridge, Reba Kelsey, and Nellie, all the people that Kwaku, Larry Crow, Mama Olabisi, who aren't going this year, but who are going in previous years, and we're going to share video of them having conversation with us about the connecting what we do now with what happened with ASCAC back in the 90s and 80s, and all of that work now empties forward into that work. All of that, now we have the narrative and the Nubia family, and we had this broader community of folk who are connecting, not because they haven't been working before in various ways, but because they have been connecting before. Now we're sharing, and we see this momentum emerging. And in this moment, as the social structures that we live in are in often violent confrontation with each other, the question of how we move together, how we live together, how we nations within these larger nations and states can learn from previous human experiences really becomes even more important. How do we lengthen and strengthen memory so that you can receive from that work the type of memory, the type of determination to change the world and to change the conditions we've in we live in now. So the question of the culminating moment, I think it's important for us going as we usually go in August is important. And it is a revealed importance for me this year because, and again, as I said, next week when we come back together, there'll be some even more important because I'll have the conversations that we've been having to share. And I'm just really excited about that always, but always new at the same time in a Sankofa process. It always comes this first 2 weeks of August in the wake of a couple of months of intense travel, community, listening, interacting. And this year, I don't think that there has been a 2 month period when I've been kind of more in movement, in motion than this past year. Not in recent memory. We just finished summer school at Howard, the classes we taught. I always talk about. Of course, Freedom Schools is just concluding now. Shout out to all my Freedom Schools folks with the closing ceremonies this week. And then, of course, all those other places beginning at the end of May, going to Birmingham with the state and local elected officials there, and then back and forth throughout the South between Georgia and Tennessee, and then going for the Martin Delaney ritual and coming back, and then back and forth up and down the East Coast. Just a lot of movement in June and July. And all of that coming to, again, through a moment when I can sit here and about to get on this plane. That coming up yesterday from DC, I was working my Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers joint. I mean, we were out there at Colonel Charles Young's house with Larry and Olabisi and the whole crew. We were out there back in June. And so there are a couple of things, and then we'll kind of wind it up. I always have the impulse, because at the center of this is reflection. So, and everything has now inverted. For a stretch in my life, you got a fall semester as an academic, a spring semester an academic. In the summer, you're supposed to do your research and work on your projects and kind of rejuvenate. Well, that's not how it has ever worked for me. But even more now, because now we jailbroken everything, the summer is the time when it kind of like is the belly that's going to shape the rest of the year. Because that's when, unencumbered by the daily practice of classes, travel and go, even though I was doing it during the school year as well, you don't have the metronome of these class. Well, that's aside for a moment. Now I can open it up and go over it. And that's really the center. So the summer becomes the center. And then what happens is now I'm really eager when I'm coming back is to empty all that now into this inverted momentum where this is the center, the belly, which actually allows for the everyday practice of the work, the center of the work, that organizing work, that community work. And then the rest of the year allows for a kind of connecting to what really takes place in the summer. So that makes the journey to and from the Nile Valley very important. The journey to is a moment to center, to reflect, to think about what we're about to do. And then the journey from there here is a moment to concretize, to have it mapped out now based on this past several months. What do we do going forward? So, you know, one of, if not the most important things for me leaving the space that we're in is to curate my bag. What am I going to bring? And so the digital world makes that a lot easier. I don't know how many 100, maybe probably more books, different things that got on the device, the computer. But then the physical thing becomes important because there are things you can't get digitally. So what am I going to take? This time I got the smallest amount of physical stuff that I think I've ever traveled to Kemet with. There was a time when most of the stuff I had was books and materials, clothes. I got what I need, but it's not that important. Well, this year there were several categories I wanted to curate. One was kind of an overview piece in terms of physical thing, something that while people are asleep on the plane, I can just turn on the light and read. I don't have to open up any device, laptop, or anything. I can just read. So I got that. Then There is cultural work. Who am I, do I want to think about in terms of the footsteps I'm walking in? I'm thinking about everybody. The ancestors are already here, but who do I want to use as kind of like a focal point, as saying this is the kind of uh, daily work. If sistering's a verb, brothering's a verb. If sister's a verb, brother's a verb, father's a word, son a verb, son is a word, a verb. All those things are verbs. People, we're peopling each other. We're in community with each other. And so that's a category I wanted to have. And then there's the concept. What concepts do I want to think about and renew? Of course, the Africana Studies framework is always in my mind. I'm applying it wherever I'm reading and thinking. And then is there something in the contemporary moment in terms of politics, global politics, US politics I want to keep? So for the overview for Kemet, now I got all my stuff, the chronology stuff. And of course, Mario Beatty, who's the finest, one of the finest scholars I know, of course, is here. So he's going to be leading us through so much. I decided to put in my bag Juan Carlos Moreno Garcia's book, The State in Ancient Egypt. It's very important. We'll actually see this piece here. It's a beautiful piece in the Cairo Museum. You see the Neteru behind the pharaoh there. It's a beautiful piece, these Black people. But there's interesting because what he's doing here, Moreno is doing here, he's not going through the chronology of Egypt in the way we usually think about it. We'll do all that stuff. So we'll talk about the Old Kingdom. We'll talk about the so-called Pyramid Age. What comes before that? We're going to be standing at the pyramids after all, Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, and all that. We'll talk about that intermediate period where you see people coming into the Nile Valley trying to disrupt and how they push that back. Then we'll go to the so-called Middle Kingdom, which is always very important. And we've talked about all this before. You can go back and see the discussions in class. And next week, I'll be much more concrete and succinct about that. So the period when in the Middle Kingdom, now we're talking about maybe about 4,000 years ago, 4,200 years ago, they reach back into their memory 1,500 years. So it will be like us today reaching back to the year 500. So in the Middle Kingdom, they go back to the Pyramid Age and said, what did we do then that was so powerful that we can draw from to renew ourselves now? So that's the moment when you see this incredible Sankofa moment. And a Sankofa moment from 2200 BC that goes back to 3500 BC. I'm sorry, a Sankofa moment that in like 1900 BC takes it back. What the hell? And then you see another intermediate period disruption. Then you see the so-called New Kingdom. That's the place where most people, when you think about ancient Egypt, you're thinking about. But Egypt was thousands of years old by the so-called New Kingdom. 1500, 1400 BC, or you talk about Hatshepsut or Tutankhamun, King Tut, so to speak, Akhenaten and all them, Jehudimos the Third, Amenhotep, then Queen T and all this. This is that period, and then of course another period of disruption in the late period, the Ptolemies, the Greeks. Now you're talking about Anthony and Cleopatra. Egypt is ancient by then, so we're gonna go. But what Moreno does is consider what does that all mean in terms of the state, and I thought he had a very interesting definition of the word state, the concept of state. Is on page 188, the pharaonic state in comparative perspective. Mind you, we're balancing this. We ain't just talking about kings and queens. So everybody Africans, we always talking about we was all kings and queens. We weren't all kings and queens. You've said the obvious thing. Thank you for reminding us we weren't all kings and queens. More importantly, what you should be reminding us of is that who in the hell wants to be a king or a queen? Peace, queen. Okay, I understand the sentiment, but the concept of monarchy is problematic for a number of reasons. This, especially if you're using it as a form of domination, the state is the important thing. So we're going to spend time. We'll talk about that next week, maybe, or the week after when I'm back. We go to Set Ma'at, the place where the workers live. It's very important. We consider all that in terms of social class in ancient Egypt. But this is something that Moreno writes. He says, so what is a state then? Endless discussions have tried to whittle down a definition of the state and define its principal characteristics. I want us to think about this just for a moment here in the context of the United States of America. What is a state? And I tell people all the time, the United States isn't a nation, it's a state with many different nations in it. That we are nations within a state formation that has many nations within it. Sometimes the nations are within nations. We saw the recent news on the Africans who were once captives, who now many of them refer to themselves as freedmen. which really speaks not to their national identity, but to their relationship to the state. In this case, the Cherokee or the Chickasaw or the Seminoles, so-called five civilized tribes. We saw what happened in Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago. The idea that they have rights, of course they do, going back to the 1866 treaty and the Dawes Commission and the Dawes Act and all that. But these are state relations. What is a state? Moreno is writing in the context of ancient Egypt, but what can we learn from Egypt coming forward? He says, endless discussions have tried to whittle down a definition of the state and define its principal characteristics. The definition proposed by Jessup, this is a 2016 and 2018, somebody writing in 2016 and 2018, is perhaps the most operative one and is valid not only for the modern, but also for ancient states. That's what's key for me. Because I'm thinking about it in terms of the Africana Studies framework, social structure. Who are Africans to other people? Who are people to other people? What is the social structure within which all these various nations, which we might call governance, who are we to each other, these nations formations operate in the context of larger formations, state formations, and here's the definition offered. He defines three basic features in any state. First, a clearly demarcated core territory under the more or less uncontested and continuous control of the state apparatus. So borders. This is where you get the villain of the piece, citizenship. If you're not within these borders, under the rules that we have, you're not a citizen, which means you have a diminished level of humanity. There is no concept of citizenship in ancient Egypt that they have identified to date. We talked about that in office hours when we talked about the social structure concept in our African Studies framework. That's important. I've always said citizenship, as it is practiced in the contemporary world, becomes a bludgeon on people. I need healthcare, I need food, I need shelter. Then you should be able to get it. And it shouldn't be based on whether you're a citizen or not. You want open borders. I don't care whether the borders are open or closed. I'm saying if you're on this territory, you should be able to have basic human rights. There's a new book on Charles Sumner that's out. Senator Sumner, who was one of the major architects, perhaps even the major architect in the United States Senate of Reconstruction. Sumner argues that the 14th Amendment, that the Reconstruction Amendment should be about human rights. He uses the phrase human rights in the 1860s and 1870s to apply to the United States Constitution. So all you hillbillies out there that want to talk about MAGA, we know what you mean. White nationalism, make America white. And you ain't gonna make it white again because it never was white. But you want to say, we want to know what the intent of the founders was. Well, the founders of the United States of America, the way we live in it, ain't George Washington and James Madison. And although Sumner would bow down to them too, because he was trained in part by John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, who helped write the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. But the founders of this republic, that you want to, if you want to call it that, ain't in the 18th century, my friend. They're in the 19th, and they are the ones who framed and who fought for and who advanced the Reconstruction Amendments, 13, 14, and 15, whatever their flaws are, especially 13. But the point is this, Charles Sumner says it's about human rights, and he didn't say that in 2025, friends. He said it in the 1860s. So you can lie on them all you want, but you're a liar if you try to pretend that the conversation we're having now wasn't being had then, and it was being had then. John, this goes to you, John Roberts, and all your little friends, Clarence Thomas and Sammy DeBoer Alito and Andy Comey Barry and them, Ketanji Brown Jackson, trying to tell y'all, Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson, trying to tell y'all the plain language of the 14th Amendment and what the framers intended, which included Charles Sumner, was human rights. He ain't going that far yet, but stay tuned. He goes on and says three basic features again. First, a clearly demarcated core territory under the more or less uncontested and continuous control of the state apparatus. Second, a politically organized, coercive, administrative, and symbolic apparatus endowed with both general and specific powers. There it is. Coercive, meaning the police, meaning law enforcement, meaning you give them billions of ICE to go harass and threaten people, meaning there's this concept that this is the territory and we're going to coerce you into behavior. Coercive behavior like wearing a hijab at a funeral. Why? Because you are the governor of the state. And therefore, this person who has sacrificed their life in part because they were an agent of the state must be honored to reinforce the idea that there is a state. So you got to put this hijab on to, because that guy was not only a good Muslim who immigrated here at age of 20, he was a New York City police detective. And when you salute him as a 3-year-old, you're saluting Officer Islam. Ooh, that creates cognitive dissonance. But the second of the three definitions of the state is, again, he says, A politically organized, coercive, administrative, and symbolic apparatus. Saluting, flags on caskets, the whole notion, that's symbolic, but it's an apparatus that is endowed with both general and specific powers. It's part of an apparatus endowed with specific and general powers. You have the ability to arrest somebody, stop and frisk. You have the ability to search somebody. Wait, what is this coercive power? That's the process of a state. And then finally, a permanent or stable population that is subject to the state's political authority and which is regarded, at least by that apparatus, if not its subjects, as binding. The apparatus, whether the subjects agree or not, birthright citizenship is plain language in the 14th Amendment. We were in the bookstore yesterday. I had to fight myself not to purchase this journal because I'll get it when I come back. Because otherwise, I said, I'm not taking this journal to Africa. It's the Journal of the American Enterprise Institute. And there's an article in there, John Woo co-authored. Some of y'all know who John Woo is, WOO. If you don't, look him up. Go back to the Bush administration on the constitutional basis for birthright citizenship. Oh, this is interesting. This the AEI. Y'all kind of right wingers, not even just kind of right wingers. Y'all get nervous about this thing, right? Because you get ready to unravel this whole thing. There's this quote unquote social contract. Take it back to John Locke. If you were born here, you're a citizen. Well, these boys want to stop that. Why? Because they want to make America so white and they want to be able to stop you from coming here. Okay, my thing is, do your worst, baby. Because only two things can happen. Either you're going to get beat back by the courts, which I think that's probably going to happen. Those of you worried about tariffs and Mr. Taco Trump and all that, you probably saw what happened. Now the United States Court of Appeals for the federal circuit, that's in D.C., the Federal Court of Appeals heard an appeal that came from the federal trade court, the administrative court, because they said that this whole notion that this boy can just go around and slap tariffs on people around the world because he woke up with an itch on his left side, or he mad because his little racist buddy in Brazil going to jail, he could just do that. That's unconstitutional. The trade court said it. Now they're at the Court of Appeals, and they roasted Brett Shoemate, the lawyer for the Department of Justice, this week on that concept because it's going to be found unconstitutional. That's one of the only two things that can happen. Either they're going to find it unconstitutional or they're not. That could be everything from these tariffs to birthright citizenship. And if they decide that birthright citizenship can be undermined, then the second thing happens, which makes me equally enthusiastic. You're going to tear up the floorboards of this criminal enterprise, this state you call United States of America, and then the people who are held together. If we take this definition that Juan Garcia is applying to ancient Egypt and put it today, since he said the things can be compared, that third of the categories, which was there's a coercive element, there's a symbolic element that is given power and force by the state, even if not everybody in the state, but there's a definable, there's a definition of who's in the state, who these powers are applied to or apply on without them having to agree or disagree. If you tear up that, then what do you have? You got every person for themselves, and you're gonna find out your power isn't as powerful as you think it is. Those three things. So that's why I brought that book, The State of Ancient Egypt. We got the history of Egypt, the kind of things, all that stuff is covered, and I'm going to be rethinking all that again, as I've done many times. But this time I wanted to bring in something that gave that overview, that connected it. The cultural workers I wanted to think about, that I wanted to put in my bag. We've mentioned one of them already, Tony K. Mombara. I got a chance to sit with the film. And thanks again, Kelly, for reminding me, and to the founders and the progenitors of the Black Star Film Festival for making it digital and a screening available. You can just purchase that and then watch. Good to see my dear friends Holly and Shariq Garima in the film, who were dear friends with Tony Cade Mombara. There's footage of Shariq sitting there with Tony Cade and Ackland Lynch, who's sitting there in the film being interviewed as well. It's a beautiful moment. You see her there commenting on the fact that she was a cultural worker trying to improve the society. Shariq makes that point. What is the impact of your work on the social change that we're all trying to see? How do we do intellectual work as a weapon, not just an exercise in academic intelligence? It's not about writing books and doing research. All that's important, and people find it very satisfying. But ultimately, how you going to change the world? Shriek makes that point about her friend Tony Cade, as does Ackman Lynch. So you've seen one. That's Tony Cade. The other one I thought I would bring is Sterling Brown. And of course, the Garimas made the film Sterling Brown After Winter, which you can't stream. The only print you can see is the Garima's print. And you got to come Sankofa for that. So they said they do periodic screenings. I let everybody know when the next one is. But I brought a book out that was done probably about 6 or 7 years before Sterling Brown made transition. Sterling Brown, a UM tribute edited by the Black History Museum Committee. This was a group out of Philadelphia, the great James Spady and others. And you've heard me talk about Spady before. Very important figure. This is a tribute to Sterling Brown. Articles written by all the people you see on the cover of this book. This is a very, very, and it's small. I put it in. Author Huff Fawcett wrote the introduction. Let me read to you who's in here. Many people will know these names, but if you don't, I'm just reading them into the record, and then we'll kind of wind this up. We're gonna head to the airport. Venus Adams, Houston Baker, Mary Baraka, Marcus Christian, Eugenia Collar, Leon Damar, Gregory Day, Ophelia Egypt. We've heard the voice of Ophelia Egypt here in class. However, Fawcett, Isaac Foy, Michael Harper, Stephen Henderson, Edward Jones, Lewis Jones, James Lee, Alan Lomax, Otto McLaren, Jerry Manglione, Lofton Mitchell, Catherine Morgan, Lois Pierre Noel, Dudley Randall, Leopold Sangor, James Spady, Isaac Stanley, George Starks, Nathaniel Sweet, Cynthia Taylor, Darwin Turner, and John A. Williams. The man who cried, I am. Y'all know about him. You know about the King Alfred plane. You know about Johnny Williams. They're all paying tribute to Sterling Brown. And the reason I brought Sterling Brown paired with Tony Cade at this moment is to think about how people do cultural work in the world and recovery. Because the study of Egypt is also about cultural work. How are we looking at the way African people have made meaning? That's the cultural meaning making category in our African Studies framework. And then pass that meaning on across time and space, movement and memory. I brought Shanice's book because I wanted to sign it for me, In the Nile Valley. And she's writing about a contemporary cultural meaning maker, Beyonce Knowles Carter, and how Beyonce Knowles Carter is bringing memory from the Ifa tradition, from the Yoruba tradition, and Shanice is trained in comedic work as well. So to be in the Nile Valley, to hear her talk about how is this contemporary person? Everybody's caught up with Cowboy Carter. I know y'all love that red, white, and blue. I think he can be redeemed. I don't think it can be redeemed and don't really care. It's an object of the state, the second of the three elements of the definition that Juan Garcia is using applied to ancient Egypt. I understand what the flag represents and why it's important to drape the casket of a Muslim who's in a casket in the first place. Look at those combinations on the way to a cemetery with that U.S. flag from one part, and then them green and white stripes at the bottom representing the police. Why are the stripes green and white? Again, who, as part of a nation within a larger national concept, within a state formation, gets integrated and who doesn't get integrated? Could it be red, black, and green to be part of that flag for the police? No, but it's green and white. Why is that? Nations nations within a state formation. So in this process, what I wanted to do is bring Sterling Brown in because Sterling Brown always understood himself as a Black man, as a Negro in the United States, as I would say, an African in the state formation. So Sterling Brown is grounded in governance, but most importantly for me, this book represents those who knew him, who learned with him, who learned beyond him, now saying who he was to them. This is a governance document, a governance formation document, talking about a cultural meaning maker, a cultural worker who did it everywhere, as is talked about in this book, in the bars, in the classrooms, in the streets, on the farm, wherever he found himself, a person who used language, who used culture to connect movement and memory. And then the U.S. anchor. There's a new book coming out. Oh, actually, yeah. This is the other book that I put in my bag. Two other ones. Walter Scheidel, What is Ancient History? This book just came out, Princeton University Press. He's asking the question, what is ancient history? What Scheidel is doing, and I got about four of his books that I have on digital, but this is the one I put in my bag because what he's asking is, what does it mean to talk about ancient history? As he says, the idea of ancient, in fact, he says, what is ancient history? Wikipedia, I don't quote Wikipedia, but he's doing this because he knows he's using it as a point of entry because a lot of people do. Wikipedia, the world's go-to source for free information, confidently tells us that, quote, ancient history is a time period from the beginning of writing and recorded human history through late antiquity. Ancient history covers all continents inhabited by humans in the period 3000 BC to AD 500, end quote. And then Shadell says, if only that were so. Academics employed to study and teach ancient history, and he has that in quotes, tend to be far less inclusive. Belying its grand title, the venerable multi authored 14-volume Cambridge Ancient History restricts itself to the Mediterranean, including Egypt and West Asia. So does the more recent Encyclopedia of Ancient History, which promises to cover, quote, all Mediterranean civilizations, including the Near East and Egypt, end quote, from the Bronze Age to the first half of the Byzantine history. And then he goes on. He says, when they say ancient history, they ain't talking about you. They ain't talking about what we call Asia, the indigenous people. And when they're talking about the rest of the world, they're really talking about the Mediterranean, and they include Egypt because Egypt is inevitable, but they don't include the rest of Africa. And they say Egypt ain't really part of Africa, even as they say it's African. This is the tension. This is the difficult thing. We're about to go into the Nile Valley, and these are the arguments people are having to this day. You just saw Zahi Hawass come to the United States with this long tour about the Egyptians and spreading this. And he said the Egyptians weren't black. I'm not arguing with Zahi Hawass. Why would I spend any time arguing with him? I'm about to go in the country where he's a citizen and I'm not. My job is not to argue. My job is to remember. And once you remember, you understand that some arguments you ain't got to have. We're here to study and look at our common humanity. And I'm coming as an African person, and I'm very clear about who I am to myself and who I am to other people. It's time to be smart. As John Clark would say, don't get mad, get smart. Who you arguing with, why you arguing with them. And so that's one of the final books. And then again, that U.S. anchor to LinkedIn and Transform. I have a book in my bag I'm not going to show because it isn't out yet. I got an advanced review copy. And it's a book which purports to talk about the relationship of race to education in this country and to the building of a nation. As I've started reading it, nothing new, no surprise to me, because I know I have a fundamental difference of perspective on the question of whether this is a nation. It is not. And there's nobody who can show me that it is. Let me not say that. There may be somebody. I invite those to, we'll have office hours regular time. I think in Kemet, it'll be like 2 or 3 in the morning, which is great because everybody's quiet and we had a conversation. So again, we'll pick this up in office hours, but on Monday. But this book is talking about how racism informed everything from the siphoning of resources from African people to build white education spaces in the US to the dispossession of the indigenous people and the attempt to suppress their culture and amputate their culture through the schools, the schooling process and all that. Very important work. A lot of it's been covered before. I'm interested to see this scholar's perspective, but I also understand that I've already kind of skimmed the book, but I'm going to, read it, of course, thoroughly. But what I find missing, of course, is the thing that's always missing from this work. The minute you say race, you've just amputated your memory. I'm about to recover the momentum of memory. And as you recover the momentum of memory, this is another reason we go to Kemet. You begin to understand that if you're going to start with the idea that we are Black people, that we came into existence as Black people, you're going to cut off everything before the trauma. And the trauma informs all these scholarly projects. They keep trying to stuff Blackness with this transformative power that it can only have when you unblock your memory. That's the challenge that we have. So I'm going to kind of close now. And it's funny, I'll close with this quote from Eleanor Traylor, the great Eleanor Traylor, now in her 90s, who, of course, still in DC, master teacher, who Tony K. Bambara called the best thinker we have. He said, well, she's the best thinker we have. Dr. Traylor appears in the film, in Louis Massai's film, TCB, Tony K. Bambara, Community Organizing, School of Organization. And she says this, she shows a picture of her book, her copy of Gorilla My Love, and from Tony Cade, and she reads the inscription Tony Cade Bambara gave to her, and one of the things wrote in the book for her, and one of the things she says to Eleanor Traylor, her friend Eleanor Traylor, is that a home ain't a home, a bookshelf ain't a bookshelf, and a home ain't a home without a gorilla in it. See you shortly, Tony. And Dr. Traylor said, yep, that's Tony K. That's my copy of Gorilla My Love. And I think that's where we can pause for now, because the idea that a social structure ain't a social structure until we show up fully. Our nation has to be part of the state or it ain't gonna be no state. That funeral really resonated with me in that regard. This man gave his life for other people he did not know. And he had on the uniform of the NYPD, but his whole culture was there and they had to come respect that. A state can't be a state until we all up in it. So
Amen.
pause with
Amen.
that. Amen.
safe travels. Let me thank everyone who got up early, and I also want to
Yes.
highlight, nearly 1,000 people in Nubia to get up, be flexible, not know,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
we have to be flexible. We got to stay ready,
Yes.
and I'm
Yeah.
so grateful, not complaining, just here, you know,
Yes.
and I just want to thank this community and covering you with all of the ancestors and the spiritual Holy Ghost, all the people, all the things. Safe travels to everyone.
Yes. Thank
Love you
you.
so much.
Love you. We'll pour a libation for you. We bring everybody with us. Don't worry. I got some stuff in my bag. We gonna do the rituals for everybody. Love you. And I'll talk to everybody soon.
Okay. All right. See you on Monday.
Monday. Oh yeah.
Office hours, y'all. Yes.
Yeah. Love
Thank
you.
you. Carr. Love you too. All right. Bye
Okay.
bye.
What's up? Bye.